Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. You had started to tell us who at the scene who handled those solo cups. Can you describe that for us, please?
I handled them to the scene. Sergeant Lang collected the samples.
Under your supervision?
Yes.
Did anybody other than Sergeant Lang handle those solo cups?
No.
So once they were in his possession, they remained in his possession until they were booked into evidence?
They were bagged, placed in Sergeant Lang's vehicle. He transported them to Camp Police Headquarters, transported it into the office, and logged them in as evidence, yes.
Did you watch all that happen?
I did not.
You did not. So you're presuming those next steps after he was out of your view?
I know that because he told me so.
Well, that's hearsay. Move to strike, Your Honor.
All right, I'll strike the end of that.
Thank you. Not what he told you, what you observed.
I did not observe him place it in evidence, yes.
At what point did you lose sight of those solo cups?
When I got in my vehicle to leave the scene.
So once the solo cups were in his, you saw them go in the brown paper bag?
That's correct.
The evidence bag. Then you saw them go in the truck?
That's correct.
And at that point, you don't have any personal information about what happened with those solo cups? Personal observations?
Until I removed them from temporary evidence, I have no recollection, correct.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about once you were inside the home. You've already indicated that you did not seek a search warrant. You did not seek consent to search the home, correct?
That's correct.
Did you look around the house for any sign of a struggle or a fight?
No.
Did you go to the basement at all?
No.
Had you ever been in the house before that morning at 9 a.m.?
Never.
Sorry?
Never.
Okay. Did you go to the backyard?
No.
Did you personally observe whether or not that house has a bulkhead door that services the basement?
I have no idea.
Did you photograph any portion of the house?
The front of the house.
Sorry, bad question. Good point. Inside the house, did you photograph any part of the house?
No.
Did you have a cell phone with you?
Yes.
Has a camera on it?
Yes.
So you could have photographed it, you chose not to.
I would have needed permission or a warrant.
And you got neither.
That's correct.
You sought neither.
That's correct.
Did you photograph any of the individuals in the home for instance, for injuries or anything like that?
No.
Did you or Sergeant Lang separate the witnesses before they were interviewed?
There was only one witness he was interviewing,
Who was that?
Jen McCabe.
Where was everybody else in the house?
I believe they were all in the same area. The kitchen, I believe it was the kitchen.
Those individuals were not taken to a different part of the house?
Not that I'm aware, no.
They were allowed to communicate with and among one another?
Sure, yes.
And I think you already answered this, but I'm going to ask it just to make sure I'm clear. None of that interview of Jen McCabe was not recorded in any way? Audio or video recorded?
Correct.
How long were you inside the house for that interview?
10 minutes, maybe.
Other than Jim McCabe being interviewed, were any of the other witnesses inside that house asked any questions by Sergeant Lang or by you?
No, not that I believe so. Not that I recall.
Were you the person on February 1st who gave access to the Massachusetts State Police to the Sally Port?
I was probably one of them. The Sally Port doors can only be opened by dispatch.
Did you approve or authorize those doors to be opened for purposes of MSP coming in, Massachusetts State Police coming in and processing that vehicle?
I don't know if I specifically did it at that point, but I certainly would, yes.
You knew that the vehicle had been in that Sally Port since January 29th in the afternoon, correct?
I don't believe what point I knew it was in the Sally Port, but I did know it was there for days before, yes.
Okay. And if it had been there from January 29th to February 1st, that's 3 full days.
That's correct.
From the time that that SUV arrived and was situated in the Sally Port, how many people had access to that truck, that SUV?
How many people had access to the Sally Port, or is that what, are you asking one
I'm
of
going to
the? I would say the entire department.
Dozens?
Yes, correct.
Hundreds?
No, we're very small.
I don't know that, so it's
We're probably 45.
45. And just about every one of those 45 people would have access to that Sally Port and that SUV had they wanted to.
Had they wanted to, yes.
And that 45 doesn't include Brian Higgins.
It probably does, but he would have access as well.
Thank you. Those same individuals that would have access to the SUV inside the Sally Port, very obviously, would also have access to anything else that had been placed in the Sally Port, along with the SUV, correct?
That is correct.
Did you photograph or cause to be photographed that SUV immediately upon its arrival into the Sally Port on January 29th?
I wasn't working, no.
Did anybody, to your knowledge, seek to photograph the condition of that vehicle immediately when it arrived at the Sally Port?
I wasn't there, I can't say.
You've certainly never seen any photographs from January 29th immediately when that SUV was brought into the Sally Port, right?
Other than our evidence, I haven't seen any evidence in this case.
You indicated that Massachusetts State Police was having some difficulty removing the light. We saw a short snippet of the video, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Who made the decision to even remove the taillight? Was that Canton PD or was it Massachusetts State Police?
That would have been somebody within the state police.
Okay. And then you contacted Officer Wanless to actually facilitate the removal of that light, right?
I contacted dispatch to ask Officer Wanless to return.
And you knew at the time that Officer Wanless was a sworn Canton police officer.
That's correct.
But Lieutenant Gallagher, you told us just a few minutes ago that you and the chief, actually you and the chief agreed that the Canton Police Department was completely recused from this case in the investigation based on a conflict of interest, correct?
No, you're spinning it. What I said was from participating in investigative interviews.
So they could take part, Canton Police Department could take part in any other part of the investigation, according to you, with the exception of investigative interviews?
We can open doors, we can facilitate things, yes.
Remove
Yes,
taillights?
there's nothing, no, yeah, if it's an assist, round peg, round hole, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so in other words, Canton Police Department, notwithstanding the conflict of interest, was still allowed to participate in the investigation of the Karen Reed matter.
There was no conflict of interest. I said appearance of conflict of interest, so we have to be careful. I didn't believe there was a conflict. I honestly believe we could have investigated this case,
Well,
but it wasn't the appearance of such a conflict.
You also didn't believe that there was probable cause to search the house even.
I know that.
That answer will stop. It's stricken, and so is the question.
So Canton Police Department was, in fact, at your authority, given permission to manipulate that light in terms of pulling it out of the SUV, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Canton Police Department was allowed to facilitate the removal of that light.
Yes,
And during the course of the removal of that light, that taillight was broken, correct?
that's correct.
And shattered.
Yes.
There's parts of it that were falling onto the ground.
I don't think there was anything falling on the ground at that point.
So now we do have evidence that that taillight, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, was broken or broken more once it was inside the Sally Port in Canton PD's custody.
But you have to rephrase that. I don't understand the broken more part.
During the removal process, that light was broken even more.
No.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just take a look at that photograph and tell me if you recognize it.
I don't recognize the photograph. It's the first time I've seen it.
Do you recognize what's depicted in the photograph?
It's a broken taillight.
Does that appear to be the taillight that was removed during the process that we saw in the video just a few minutes ago under direct examination?
I can only assume it is. I've never examined the light.
So you can't assume. So can you answer the question, Lieutenant?
No.
You don't recognize it?
No.
Okay, and were you, I didn't see you on the video, but it was a very dark video. Were you there?
Yes, I'm in the gray shirt.
Okay, were you there as Officer Wanless was actually removing the taillight from the vehicle?
Not sure. I'd have to watch the video again.
Okay, do you recall if pieces and parts were being broken off and shattered while he was removing it?
Not at all.
May I approach?
Yes.
Were you the person who actually recovered? I think you did answer this. You were not the person who knelt down and actually recovered the blood droplets.
Correct.
That was Sergeant Lyon.
That's good.
When you gave the, sorry, let me rephrase that. Was it you or Sergeant Lang that put the solo cups into the evidence bag?
Sergeant Lank.
Was that in your presence? Yes. Okay. How long before, after he put the solo cups in the evidence bag, did he put the evidence bag in his truck?
Seconds, less than a minute.
And then how long did the truck sit there until he left or you left and you were no longer able to observe it?
He left immediately.
You were at the location the location of the Sally Port on February 3rd. You've already testified to that, correct?
No, I testified February 1st.
I'm sorry, my mistake, February 1st. You also indicated that at your direction that Sergeant Lang booked the solo cups into the evidence locker.
That's procedure, yes.
Right. I understand it's procedure. I'm asking if he actually did it.
Yes.
Okay. Did you see a log of that?
Excuse me?
Did you see a log of that?
I saw the police report.
Which police report?
The original call.
Okay. And in that police report, he indicates that he took the solo cups back to Canton Police Department and booked them into evidence, right?
It was given a property number and assigned to temporary evidence.
And when something is given a property number, is there an officer working that property area to assign the property numbers?
No, the officer placing the property into evidence assigns the property number himself.
I see. So that officer would assign a property number and physically place that into temporary, what's it called again?
Temporary evidence until the evidence officer takes custody of it.
Okay. Did an evidence officer actually take custody of these items?
No, because it was being transferred to the state police, so it wasn't going into our permanent evidence locker.
So where did those cups sit for the 3 days between January 29th and February 1st?
In a refrigeration unit in temporary evidence.
And is there a log to sign in and sign out to make sure that the chain of custody of items like this are maintained?
The evidence officer keeps that log, yes.
Is there any log, Lieutenant Gallagher, of these items being booked into the temporary evidence locker?
There should be, as far as, but I don't know for a fact, but there should be, yes.
I agree there should be. I'm asking you if there is.
I don't know the answer to that.
The fact of the matter is, there is no log or document or report ever showing that these items were ever booked into the temporary evidence locker at Canton PD. Isn't that right?
I don't believe that's accurate.
Do you have that evidence log?
I don't have access to the evidence log.
Could you get access to the evidence log?
No.
You're a supervisor at Canton PD. Why would you
correct.
not have access to the evidence log?
I think only 2 or 3 people have access to evidence.
Who would they be?
The evidence officer,
Which is who?
Paul DiGiapietro, Sergeant.
Can you spell that for us, please?
DIGIAMPIETRO.
Who else?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm assuming the chief of police,
Chief Berkowitz, I would assume.
most likely.
Yeah,
But I don't know. Possibly, yes.
Head of detectives?
No,
Any other lieutenants or supervisors?
I don't believe so. I know I don't have access as a lieutenant.
If there's no evidence log of an item being booked into evidence, that's a pretty good indicator that it actually never made it into the evidence log, evidence locker, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
We do know that wherever it went, the blood items went back to, and the glass went back to Canton PD, correct?
That's correct.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I approach briefly?
Yes.
Thank you. Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you kindly to take a look at those 4 photographs, and then once you've had a chance to review them, just look up at me. I'll ask you a couple.
Did you see them?
I don't know what was just handed to the witness.
Why don't you go take them from the witness? Take a look.
There's copies right there as well.
Thank you. I'm fine.
May I approach briefly?
Yes.
Sure.
Make sure there's 4 or 5.
Okay.
Take your time.
I'm all set.
Do you recognize those photos, or what's depicted in those photos?
Yes.
Do you recognize the time frame those photos would have been taken
Yes.
based on context?
Yes.
February 1st, correct?
I have no idea if it was February 1st, but it would be between the 29th of January and February 1st.
Fair enough. Your Honor, may I publish?
Okay. Have they been introduced?
They have not yet been introduced, Your Honor. I'm sorry, protocol-wise, I missed that step. I need to ask that these be marked as next in order.
Okay. Is there
Photographs?
any objection?
No, Your Honor.
I might be able to use this. Yes. Thank you. Taking a look at what's been...
Hold on. They're still being marked, and the court reporter has to record everything you say.
Thank you.
Okay.
And with the court's permission, Lieutenant, I'm going to try to go in the same order, so you might want to glance at this photograph, make it better visual for you. I'd like to ask you if you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, especially the area right down here on the right, bottom right. You see that white rag?
I do.
Lieutenant, if you take a close look at that rag, I'm going to ask you to identify it on the photograph. Do you see a couple of little dark marks on what appear to be that
I see it on that screen.
better visual up there? Okay, fair enough. What's the position of that rag as it relates to the vehicle in the photograph?
It's the rear passenger side.
Right rear quarter panel, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And is that, in fact, the SUV in question?
I believe it is.
Okay. The SUV that belonged to Miss Reed?
I believe it is. Yes.
Let's take a look at the, excuse me. It's 37.
37, okay.
Is this 37? Thanks. Your Honor, for the record, we were just speaking about item 37.
Okay.
Let's move to the... Looking at 38, does that appear to be the same rag in the photograph?
It does, yes.
Okay. You see a shadow sort of looming over the top of the photograph?
I do.
Given what you just said about evidence item 37, does that appear to be the shadow of the right rear quarter panel of the truck?
I would guess it's the tailgate.
So you can't guess?
I would say it was the tailgate. The tailgate's up, maybe the tailgate's up at this point.
You see a bag in the middle of the photograph.
Yes.
Can you read what's on that bag?
Stop and shop.
Okay, that does not look like an evidence bag, does it, sir?
No.
Matter of fact, it looks like a grocery bag.
Correct.
All right?
Yes.
So, not a forensically stable item, correct?
Correct.
Certainly not sterile.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
You know where that bag came from?
I do not.
Was that a bag that you supplied to Sergeant Lang?
I do not know. Do not recall.
Lang got the stop and shop bag.
I do not know.
Next photograph, please. 39. Taking a look at what's been marked as evidence item 39, you recognize what's in the middle of the photograph?
Yes.
What is that?
Those are the plastic cups with the coagulated blood.
Do you see on the top of the photograph the same rag
I do.
with the same markings?
Yes.
That appear that those unsealed cups with liquid blood in them are situated right near the right rear quarter panel of the SUV in this photograph?
They are to the rear of the vehicle. Yes.
And next item, please. And this appears to be evidence item 41. I'm sorry, 40. You see the same white rag,
Yes,
and you see the same evidence bag. I'm sorry, Stop and Shop bag, correct?
correct,
And it's filled with 6 solo cups
correct,
with what appears to be liquid blood.
correct.
Does that photograph appear to be taken at or about the same place near the right rear quarter panel of the SUV?
It's actually, I would say that the mat is the mat to the entrance to the booking area, so that is probably a couple of feet behind the vehicle.
Okay. Let's go back to evidence item number 37, which is the first photograph. You see the rag in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Let's go to the next item. Now you see the mat, and it's, I'm sorry, I should note this for the record, that we're now looking at 38. You see the mat and the rag in this photograph?
I do.
And you see a tire on that mat?
Yes,
That's a golf cart of some sort that belongs to the Canton Police Department?
it's a Kubota, yes.
A Kubota, thank you. Looks like the rag is in the same spot?
Yes,
All right. So the blood inside the Stop and Shop bag is sitting right next to the right rear quarter panel of that truck, correct?
you can see the rear tire. It's probably at least 3 feet from the rear. If you look at the top, I can use the marker here. This appears to me to be the rear tire, which would put this a couple of feet behind the vehicle.
Understood. Okay, that's all I have. Lights. Would you agree that having unsealed and unsecured blood next to the right rear portion of the SUV is a recipe for cross-contamination?
You want me to speak to, if I could speak to this incident alone?
That's a yes or no question. Do you think that's
It's not yes or no, but for your purposes, I would say yes.
and in fact, could even be worse, for instance, not just inadvertent cross-contamination. If somebody wanted to touch something on that bag, on those cups, and then touch the vehicle, they could easily do that with that juxtaposition of the open blood next to the back of the rear of the car.
Objection.
Sustained.
Lieutenant, if somebody was so inclined, that situation could provide an opportunity for evidence tampering, couldn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Lally?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Now, Lieutenant, if I could ask you, a phrase that was posed to you a couple times during cross-examination as far as recusal of your department, how would you define that term in this specific sense?
In this specific case,
Yes.
we did not want to go on any investigative interviews because one of our best investigators, his name is Kevin Albert, he's the property owner's brother, and we didn't think it would be appropriate if we were on those interviews questioning his family members.
Now, with regard to death investigations, specifically unattended death investigations, what, if any, role does your department typically have when it comes to those? What, if any, jurisdiction does your department have versus the state police?
The state police takes jurisdiction, they run the investigation, we assist them in any way we can, we try to help out.
Now, sir, you were asked some questions in regard to what you indicated that in regard to the drinking glass that you located in the area where Mr. O'Keefe's body was, that it didn't come from the house. Why is it?
I think I said, I believe we didn't think it came from the house at that time because they were out at the Waterfall Bar and Grill the night before. And the initial statements from Detectives Sergeant Lank and Sergeant Good obtained, nobody put John O'Keefe anywhere but where he was found, and that included his girlfriend.
Now, if I could take a step back just to the state police jurisdiction over unattended deaths, what, if any, assets the state police have as far as investigative assets that your department doesn't?
They have far superior tools to investigate. They have direct access to the crime lab. They have a CARS team that can do accident reconstruction.
Now, with regard to criminalist and turning your attention to February 1st of 2022 when you're in the Sally Pool, you mentioned that Officer Wanless came in with a toolkit to assist in removing the taillight, correct?
That's correct.
And is it your understanding essentially he just removed a clip from the back of the taillight in order to take it out of the vehicle?
I believe you can see our video just pops into the criminalist's hands.
And as far as your review of that video, your observations that day, there was nothing about the taillight that was broken during that removal process, correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as cross-contamination, you asked about, you indicated it was not a yes or no answer, but what, if anything else, would you have to add?
What counsel was depicting was the transfer of custody over to the state police. So the criminologist was handling it at that time. The photographer was photoing it. The criminologist was transferring the blood into their plastic containers. And that's why I'm sure it was being handled by a criminologist. There wasn't going to be any cross-contamination. I wasn't concerned about cross-contamination.
So that was a scenario that you were describing earlier in your direct examination as far as you're turning those items physically over to the criminalist on February 1st in the South Port area.
And they are converting them to their plastic containers, yes.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Okay.
Very briefly, you said that none of the witnesses put John O'Keefe anywhere but where he was found. That's what you just said, correct?
That's correct.
So your investigative technique is just to ask the witness, how'd that dead body get there? And if they say, I have no idea, your job's just done, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
If a witness says, we found him here, you just take the witness at their word?
Objection.
You can go ahead and answer that, sir.
No, of course not.
You might want to investigate a little further, right?
Absolutely.
And ask them questions.
That is correct.
Get search warrants.
That's
Look
when
in
there's
the house.
probable cause, we do. Absolutely.
None of that was done here, though.
No probable cause.
Thanks, that's all I have.
You are all set, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Okay. Who is your next witness, Mr. Lally?
Your Honor, the Commonwealth will call Sergeant Sean Good to the stand.
Okay, and while the sergeant's coming in, I'll see counsel about scheduling. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
It's Sean Good, Goode,
And how are you employed, sir?
at the Canton Police Department.
And how long have you been a member of the Canton Police? 17
years.
And what rank or assignment do you currently have with the Canton?
Midnight sergeant and 2 days patrol traffic.
Now, how long have you held the rank of sergeant with the Canton Police?
Coming up on 3 years.
Now, with reference to your rank and assignment as a sergeant with sort of the overnight shift, and when does that shift run from?
So it's midnight to 8. The oncoming sergeant usually comes in around 11 o'clock at night.
And in general terms, if you could describe to the jury what sort of are your duties and responsibilities as a sergeant on the overnight shift?
So I'm in charge of the patrolmen that, that work under me. There's 4 of us on the midnight, plus myself, so 5 total. 4 on the road, 1 inside.
Turning your attention to the evening of January 28, 2022 into the morning of January 29, 2022. Were you working on that occasion?
Yes, it was.
Similar capacity as you just described?
Yes.
And so the time as far as when you arrived at Canton Police Station would be similar to what you just described as well?
Yes.
Now, when you arrived, if you recall, who was sort of working with you or under you on that particular shift?
So that evening's midnight shift, it was myself, Officer Pasquarelli, Officer Mulaney, Officer Saraf, and Officer Dever.
And as far, in addition to, let me ask it this way. So when you're performing those duties in the Canton Police Station, where are you sort of physically situated within the Canton Police Department?
We're inside the dispatch room. That's where you handle all the calls, 911 calls, business lines, stuff like that. So anybody walks in the lobby, you're right there.
And so would that also be sort of part of your duties and responsibilities in regard to being the supervising sergeant for the shift?
That evening, yes, I was inside.
Now, with reference to 911 calls and dispatch, what, if any, training have you received in regard to those?
Everybody in the Canton Police Department, we do not have civilian dispatchers like other larger departments. So every officer that works patrol has to be certified on the PSAP station, which is the 911 dispatch console. And then once you're certified, you're able to answer all 911 calls.
And what, generally speaking, does that certification process entail?
It's learning the software, learning how to know the difference between a cell phone and a landline, being able to look up when if a 911 call comes in on a cell phone. We have 3 different monitors, and you'll see that one of the monitors will be a map, and it'll just ping, and you'll see that cell phone. And a lot of the time, because of the location of the town of Canton, we do get state police 911 calls that are on the highway. So you have to be able to differentiate which call it is. Is it actually us, or is it state police? Is it Randolph? Stuff like that. So you have to be able to read a map. It's not very hard, but it's that.
Now, beyond that, now, when people are calling into 911, they're typically calling in regards to an emergency, correct?
Yes.
What, if any, training do you receive in that certification process in regard to sort of demeanor or how to handle people on the line?
Obviously, if someone's calling in an emergency, they're probably going to be nervous. You want to just try to stay as calm as possible, try to relate to them, not make them any more upset than they already are, and try to get the first thing out of his location. Where are they?
Now, with respect to calls that come into 911, what, if any, difference as far as directing a call is there between something that's sort of a medical call versus a law enforcement police call?
So any call that comes in through 911, we determine if it's police, fire, medical. If it's police, obviously, we would handle it. But if it's fire, medical, we send it to Holbrook, which is the regional dispatch for Canton Fire. So it's literally just click the button, it says fire right on the screen. That call automatically gets connected to a regional dispatcher in Holbrook, who then determines what they need, whether it be ambulance, fire, stuff like that.
Now, reference to this particular shift on this particular day, January 28th and 29th, at some point during your shift, what, if anything, did you observe about sort of the weather outside?
When we came in, it was just very light flurries. There was nothing sticking to the ground, anything like that. We were all pretty prepared that we knew that there was a storm coming at some point during the night.
And through your work with the Canton Police Department, you're familiar with an individual by the name of Brian Higgins?
Yes.
And what, if any, relationship does he have with, what, if anything, does he do for work with you?
He works for the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. It's a federal agency.
And what, if any, relationship does he have with your department at Canton Police?
He has a satellite office in our department. He has his own scan card. He doesn't have to check in with myself or anybody, but he works out of our station.
And is he the only agent, federal agent with the ATF that has space or anything at your police station?
No, I believe there's actually could be U.S. Customs, 2 of them, other agents that are at work at the station as well.
And do they have sort of similar relationships as far as
Yes, yeah, they have access to the police department. If Agent Higgins has worked on certain calls, helped us out, whether it be a firearm case, stuff like that.
Now, on that evening of 28th, and specifically the early morning of January 29th, what, if anything, do you recall as far as seeing Brian Higgins around the Canton Police?
I remember at one point during the evening, he came in. I don't remember if he came into the dispatch or if I just saw him on one of the numerous monitors we have in dispatch. I can't leave that room because I'm the only one in the building on midnight. So, but we never talked or anything like that. Didn't think anything of it. It's not uncommon.
And do you recall around what time that occurred?
I believe it was probably 1:30. Again, I wasn't looking at a clock to see. But
Now, with respect to the parking lot area of the Canton Police Station, when it comes to any sort of substantial amount of snow, what, if anything, do you do with regard to the vehicles in the parking lot in reference to that kind of way?
we try to move all the cars that we're not using. That'd be on a midnight shift. It's any of our unmarked detectives cars, any of the patrol vehicles that aren't being used. We try to help out the DPW, which is the Department of Public Works, as best as possible when they try to plow our station. Because if not, all it ends up being is just one trail through the parking lot, and it's kind of a nightmare. So with the help of the other patrolmen, if we can get all the keys, sometimes they're not easily located, we try to move the cars to the outer edge of the parking lot so that DPW can make a good pass, and then we'll move them back over.
With regard to the vehicles in the parking lot, beyond sort of personal vehicles and the marked units belonging to Canton Police, with regard to some of those other agents like Mr. Higgins that you talked about, what, if any, vehicles would they have within that parking area?
He had federal cars there that he used on cases, and I believe he had two. There'd be, I guess, his cruisers. They were Dodge pickups.
And then with regard to those vehicles, in regard to snow removal, what, if anything, was typically done with regard to that?
They were parked to the outer edge, so we don't have access to them. At least I didn't have access to them.
Now, working that sort of 911 dispatch area desk, at some point, just before 5 a.m., what, if any, calls did you receive around that time?
I received a phone call from a woman, generally asking if we had locked up or transported a male party that evening. It's not uncommon that people call and say, hey, did you lock up so-and-so, or did you stop anybody? She said some version of he was out with friends, he didn't come home tonight, and his girlfriend's worried about him.
At the time that you received that call, did you know who that person was on the other end?
No.
And fair to say, at some point later, you had responded to Fairview Road, is that correct?
Yes,
And the person who would call just before 5 a.m., did you have occasion to speak with them when you were on scene on Fairview?
I did.
Who did you identify that first call to come in from?
First call was Miss Roberts.
That would be Carrie Roberts, is that
Yes.
correct? May I approach?
Yes.
So I'm showing you this. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
When you recognize that to be?
That would be the 911 call from our station.
And that would be specifically from Ms. Roberts, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm calling to introduce in the minutes of this.
No objection.
This would be Exhibit 35.
Your Honor, with court's permission, I would ask to publish that call to the jury at this point.
Okay. Hold on 1 second, please. What number? Okay. Okay. All right, thank you. I thought that's what you said. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Braintree.
Sorry, I'm sorry, because my friend's boyfriend did not come home last night. We were at waterfall, and now she is calling me hysterical because she doesn't know where he is. You didn't take anybody outside the name of John Keith, did you? Yeah, he's about to come and be on site, so.
No.
I think he probably got a ride and has got his own house, I don't know, but
Yeah, no, we didn't want anybody else or anything like that. And where do you live?
he lives on Meadow, downtown.
You live on Meadow, off Pleasant? Okay, and where? So my home, you said you grew up?
With his girlfriend down there, when I was having drinks, and then she left, and it's because he got home at some point and he never did.
Yeah.
And so I said to her, you know, I haven't been able to earlier in life, but then he came home. And he kept touching me with his nephew from his parents back to her.
Okay.
And so she knows that we can have you there, and that's be home. And so she never said she never even home.
Yeah.
So she said, if something happens, I said, okay. Well, so probably in hospital, you'll be having after, and then probably take him out to the doctor. I don't know.
Yeah, did he drive out there?
No.
No. Okay. I think, well, again, it's more, it would be driven by you. You have to, call in a conversation, talk to us, but I mean, that's right now, it's more, you get home last night, listen to this conference, sometimes we'll have them.
No, that's why. That's what she did. She called me. That's kind of why she's more freaking out. So I think I called the hospital. I said, call Canton Police to make sure if they go to different doctors, anyone that's people. If anybody puts it up.
Yeah.
You know? Can't we have one good time?
Yeah, no. But what they have to do, I was saying, but we haven't made any calls, anything like that. Don't be arrested or anything like that. All right.
All right, well, thank you.
All right, no problem. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Now, Sergeant Good, what was played in there, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of the 911 call that you had with Kelly Roberts around
Yes.
5 a.m.? Now, turning your attention to about an hour forward, approximately 6 a.m. on the 29th, what, if any, other phone calls did you receive in regard to the same sort of parts?
At 6:04 a.m. on the 911 dispatch console, I received a call from a woman at 34 Fairview.
Now, in those intervening sort of hours or so, as you were stating on the 911 call, no one sort of physically came into the Canton Police Station and reported anything in regard to this, correct?
No.
And again, the party that you spoke to on the phone at approximately 6:04 a.m., did you know that person at that time?
No.
And again, you responded later on or shortly thereafter to Fairview and spoke with a number of different people, correct?
Correct.
From those conversations on scene, you now know who placed that 911 call at approximately 6:04 a.m.
Yes.
And who is that person?
That'd be Miss McCabe.
And that would be Jennifer McCabe, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with regard to, you talked about the weather when you first arrived to your shift. Around 6 a.m., what, if anything, had changed between the weather when you arrived and around 6 a.m.?
It was snowing heavily.
Now, may I approach again?
Yes.
So, when you remember this, do you recognize that?
Yes.
Will you recognize that?
That'd be the 911 call from Mrs. McCabe.
I'll seek to introduce in a minute the next exhibit.
No objection.
Okay.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask to publish Exhibit 36 to the jury now as well.
Okay.
No, this is for one, whatever it is.
Yes, I'm from third floor to third floor here, so we can't have the impact of the snow.
You're going to because you don't get this one. You got to know it.
Yeah, no, like,
It's just an house right there line.
I think it's like 50 minutes after it's 50 minutes.
It's that line, just a ten.
Okay. Where's the budget? I don't think we can have.
Now, I don't know what you're saying.
I immediately can start the baby road getting that.
What's going on?
This is why I'm a child of the snow.
Is it so? Every one.
Yes, sir, for the hour resident. Yes, I just forgot about it. That's the thing you can't have, yes.
I don't know how to call it, what you're saying. Hello?
Yes, I'm talking kind of 34. Yes, you wrote it, you said.
32 Fairview?
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm talking to snow.
Okay.
He didn't come back here. Okay.
Okay. What's going on with you now?
We just switched him over.
Okay. And who's that in the background? Is that somebody?
That is broken. He has surgery.
Okay, how old is he?
John is around 46 years old.
46, how long did you get outside?
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and he agreed to a couple of hours. Is he Terry? Is he? I don't know if he's breathing. They're two women trying to. It could just heat and it's their fault.
Okay, can you just try asking? I know it's tough, but we have the other guy. I'm going to just get it.
Is he breathing, you guys? I don't think he's breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to test you?
Yes, he's got CPR. No, I see that.
Oh, okay. They don't feel comfortable doing so?
No, I think he's passed away.
Okay. All right, if I find the police running all the way, if everyone's trying to CPR, then I'll hang up with you, and if anything changes, you can give us a call back. Where are you guys upset?
I'm very kind. I'm over the interviews. I know. No, Kevin, you gotta get off of me. Kevin, you gotta get off of him.
You know if there's any alcohol drugs involved?
I'm talking numbers about me. If I just ever come with
Okay, is there any bleeding or anything that you just have?
yeah, possibly we'll get to
Okay, bleeding from the face. I think we'll go.
Pause that, just repeat yourself. If I could ask you just to back that up about 10 or 15 seconds or so, once the siren flag comes on.
We're fine.
Okay, bleeding from the face. All right.
Yes.
And I'll take the full blood if there is any.
Something coming out of the we're the one that is doing CPR.
Okay, one moment. Is doing CPR?
Yes. That's working with him.
All right, if you want CPR, and just let me, you give us a call back when he comes response right over on the way.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. And so, upon receiving that 911 call just after approximately 6:04 a.m., what, if anything, did you do with regard to dispatching?
So once it was connected to Holbrook, you could hear me. I ended up dispatching my own officers, my downtown cruisers to 34 Fairview, and then I had one other cruiser come back to the station so I could get down there.
And, so you yourself respond down there, is that correct?
Yes.
And about how much time elapsed from the time that you sort of transferred to Holbrook from the medical situation to the time that you traveled down to Fairview Road?
I would guess it'd have to be less than 5 minutes.
And in addition to the patrol cars and yourself, who, if anyone else, did you notify in relation to that call when you
So I phoned Lieutenant Gallagher and Detective Sergeant Lang.
Why that?
Just policy, the seriousness of the call. Lieutenant Gallagher was the off-going lieutenant the night prior, the shift prior, so that's what you usually do. And Detective Sergeant Lang is in charge of the detectives.
Now, when you left Canton Police Station to respond to Fairview, who, if anyone, assumed your role as far as manning the dispatch area in the 911?
That'd be Officer Dever.
And, may I approach?
Yes.
Sorry.
And format for reporter, if you haven't already, I'm sorry, could you just spell Officer Dever's last name if you know?
Yes, it's going to be Dever.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 14.
Sorry.
Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
That would be our roll call log, press log.
And as far as that particular log is concerned, is there any indication on there who sort of created that log?
Yes, that'd be Officer Dever.
And these are logs that you typically create when you're working that particular position as far as the dispatch desk, correct?
Yes, it's pretty much a running journal for our department.
And sort of how is that information gleaned and how is that sort of transmitted into that log?
It's as accurate as the officer that actually enters the information. So if it was busy in there and she's by herself, you're taking information down, you're writing it, then you have to physically enter it into a computer. So there would be a delay in time.
Thank you, sir. May I approach just to retrieve your? Sure.
Yes.
Now, Sergeant Good, with respect to your response to Canton Police Station 234 Fairview Road, what was sort of the path of travel that you took?
So I pulled out of the police station at 1492 Washington Street, taking a right onto Washington, heading south.
And then where did you go from there?
And then I took a right onto Chapman Street. And then it would be your third right on Fairview.
And coming down Fairview, what, if anything, did you note as far as sort of the elevation of the roadway as you come from the Chapman side down to where 34 is?
Coming from Chapman, you're heading downhill towards the end of Fairview that meets Cedar Crest.
And so where is 34 in relation to sort of Cedar Crest?
It's the second house on the left before you reach the intersection of Cedar Crest at Fairview.
And as you're approaching, or as you're en route between the police department and Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the road conditions, visibility, things like that?
It was terrible. Heavy snow, wind, visibility was awful.
And when you arrive on scene, what is sort of the first thing that you observe upon your arrival?
As I was coming down the hill, visibility was pretty bad. Obviously, I noticed the Canton Fire engine. Ambulance was already on scene. Both my two officers, cruisers, were also on scene.
Now, as far as the particular cruiser that you were in on that day, is there sort of a particular cruiser that is reserved for sort of the sergeant or lieutenant who's in charge of the?
Yes. So 682 is the primary patrol supervisor vehicle.
And that would sort of shift from shift to shift as far as whoever that particular sergeant is?
Yeah, you take the same one. 682 is it's labeled on the side of the doors, patrol supervisor.
And so is that the vehicle or that cruiser that you took to go from the police station to Fairview that morning?
Yes, I did.
And with regard to that cruiser and sort of other cruisers within the Canton Police Department, what, if any, recording system is available on those?
All marked units have it's called a WatchGuard camera system. It has front video camera, and then it also has in the prisoner passenger backseat has a camera there as well. They should be working audio in the backseat, and they're activated by, if you flip the lights on, the blue lights, it'll automatically click. You don't have to press record. The cruiser automatically starts recording. If you got in a car accident, the camera would start recording. Any kind of impact, camera starts recording. It actually ends up being passively recording, even when it's not on.
You talked a little bit about the audio as far as in the back of the cruiser, but as far as from the camera in the front of the cruiser, where is the audio recording in regard to that, if at all?
It would be on the mic. There's a mic stand that sits in a charger. It looks like almost a beeper. Should be there.
And so that's located within inside the cruiser, correct?
Yes.
May I approach the window, Sean?
Yes.
So I'm showing you a shot. You recognize that?
Yes.
When do you recognize that?
That is the flash driver for the Canton Cruiser 682 streaming.
And upon 16 introducing minutes, the next exhibit.
Exhibit 41.
All right. Why don't we break now for lunch, Mr. Lally?
Thank you.
Sir, I'll remind you, you're still under oath.
Okay. All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Sergeant, resuming with what's just been marked as Exhibit 41, that's the cruiser camera video from your Cruiser 682 that you were driving that day, is that correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, with court's permission, I'd like to publish some of that.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if you could start from the beginning through about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Can you pause it just 1 second? Sergeant, if you could, as the video is playing along, just alert the jury to the portion of the video where you observe yourself sort of pulling on to Fairview Road.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, when the sergeant does that, if you could just pause it. Okay.
All right, we're coming up to Fairview right now. That's Spring, and then next one up. That's Fairview right there on the right.
Pause just a second. Sergeant, if I can take it back just to the right that you took just before that. What street are you on right now?
That's Chapman Street.
And was that Washington Street that you would turn to get onto Chapman?
Correct.
Can I ask you, when you're turning from Washington Street onto Chapman, are there any sort of businesses or sort of landmarks on your right or your left as you're making that turn?
So on the right-hand side, as you're turning onto Chapman, that's going to be Cassie's Corner Store. And on the left at the intersection is, it used to be called Temple Beth Abraham. I believe it's Temple Bin Bar something. I don't know the actual name, but.
So there's Temple on your left and Cassie's on your right?
Correct.
And so at this point in the video here is about when you're about to turn onto Fairview, correct?
Yes.
Can I take a pause right there? Can I approach the witness room?
Yes.
It was right there.
So, sir, sorry, there's a pointer.
Oh, okay.
If I could, Sergeant, just ask you to, within this sort of still frame up here on the screen, do you recognize people that are depicted within this still frame of this video?
Yes.
And if, to whatever extent you recognize people, if you could, using the laser pointer, draw the jury's attention to whom you recognize.
All right, that's going to be myself. Right there is going to be firefighter McLaughlin. That's going to be Miss Reed. And if you played it another second, I believe that's going to be Miss McCabe, or if not, Miss Roberts.
Ms. Gilman, if you could. Ms. Gilman. The gentleman you see sort of behind you in the frame, Sergeant, do you recognize who that is?
Yes, that's Officer Saraf.
My apologies, Ms. Gilman, you can run. You can take that down. Thank you very much. And so, Sergeant, you arrive on scene in that area. First of all, what's contained in that video? Is that a fair and accurate trail, what you observed as far as the weather conditions outside that day?
Yes.
And when you arrive on scene, who, if anyone, is it to speak to first?
Initially, I walked up to Officer Saraf. I said probably some version of what's going on. Officer O'Keefe was already in the ambulance, and then I just began to try to talk to anybody.
And so the ambulance is still on scene when you arrive, is that correct?
Yes.
So Officer O'Keefe is in the back of the ambulance, is that correct?
Yes.
And at some point when you're speaking with Officer Saraf, does he direct your attention to where Officer O'Keefe was prior to being placed in the ambulance?
Yes.
Where did he direct your attention?
If you're looking at the house, it'd be left-hand side, slightly probably right in front of the flagpole.
And about how far off the roadway would you estimate that was?
I would say 8 to 10 feet off the curb.
Speaking to other people without reference to necessarily what was said to you, following your conversation with Officer Saraf, who, if anyone, you speak to next?
I believe the first person I could really get a statement from was Miss McCabe.
And when you say first person you could really get a statement from, what do you mean by that?
It was a chaotic scene. People just kind of walking in and out. And so Ms. McCabe was the first one that was able to give me a good statement of how they ended up here.
Following your conversation with Ms. McCabe, who, if anyone, did you speak to next?
Next was Ms. Reed.
And just to be clear, when we speak about Ms. Reed, you see her in the courtroom today?
I do.
Just identify as where she's seated or an article of clothing she's wearing.
She's sitting between Mr. Jackson and Mr. Yannetti.
I'll just ask the record to reflect identification.
Okay.
Now, when you're on scene and you're speaking to these individuals, what if any impact did the weather have as far as your ability to sort of hear things that weren't direct conversations you were involved in?
You couldn't hear. It was oddly eerily quiet, but the wind was so howling that I had a tough time actually hearing people. So you had to speak very loud to get next to each other.
And as far as your conversation with the defendant, Ms. Reed, what, if anything, did you ask her, or what, if any, response did she give?
So I walked Ms. Reed to the back of 682. She was obviously cold. Got her in the back of the car, put the heat on, asked her, how did she end up here? How did her boyfriend end up here? She says, I don't know.
Prior to placing her in the back of the cruiser, how would you describe her sort of demeanor outside?
Confused, hysterical, shock.
What, if anything, was she saying or asking in regard to Mr. O'Keefe prior to you putting her in the back of the cruiser?
She was yelling out, is he dead?
And is that something she said once, more than once, or something?
Numerous times.
And about how loudly was she saying?
Oh, she was yelling it.
And so once back in the cruiser, you asked her some questions after she said, I don't know. What, if anything else, did you ask her then?
I asked her if she had driven there, and she said, I think so. And then right after that, she said, I don't remember. Because of her state, I decided to stop questioning there. She couldn't keep her train of thought.
Now, you had notified Detective Sergeant Blank and Lieutenant Gallagher prior to you going to the scene, is that correct?
Yes.
About what time was it that either or both of them arrived?
Detective Sergeant Lank probably got there at about 6:20, 6:25. I immediately briefed him what we had, what was going on so far. And
about what time did Lieutenant Gallagher arrive?
I believe Lieutenant Gallagher probably came in right around 7 a.m.
Now, following your conversation with the defendant, who, if anyone else, did you speak to once?
Then I spoke to the other party, Ms. Roberts.
And if you know, about how long a period of conversation are we talking about with respect to Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts?
Each interview?
Yes.
A couple minutes.
And why was it only a couple minutes?
It was a pretty quick statement. It seemed like they were only in the car for a very short amount of time.
Move to strike.
All right, so we'll strike after. It was a pretty quick statement. Next question.
Now, with regard to Ms. Reed, after you had that brief conversation with her at the back of your cruiser, where did you go? Where did she go from there?
I believe she, at some point, we let her back outside of the car. We never closed the door on her because I was stood in the door frame with my head in the back seat. She got out. She kind of just did her own thing, paced up and back between talking to either Ms. Roberts or Ms. McCabe, yelling out.
And at some point, did the ambulance and Ms. Officer O'Keefe was in, did that leave the scene?
It did.
And following that, what, if anything, did you say or do with reference to the defendant, Ms. Reed?
Once the Officer O'Keefe was transported, Ms. Reed just was not listening to any directions. We were trying to keep her in Ms. Roberts' car to stay warm. She's going back and forth. I finally told Ms. Roberts, we have everybody's information. She's not needed here anymore. Go home, get warm. We'll reach out if we have to.
And shortly after, and at that point, did Ms. Roberts take Ms. Reed?
She did.
And what, if anything, happened next on scene with regard to Ms. Reed?
It was moments later. I got a radio transmission from our officer at the working dispatch that Mr. Reed, her father, was on the phone with Ms. Reed, and she was making suicidal threats to take her own life.
And based on that information that you received, what, if anything, did you do in regard to this?
Well, once our Officer Dever, who didn't even know that we had Ms. Reed at the scene, she radioed to us to confirm that did we have a Karen party on scene. I said we did. She explained that her father was frantic on the phone, and Ms. Reed was stating that she wanted to end her life, and he, in quotes, said he wanted her to be in protective custody. So at that time, I knew that we'd be able to get a hold of her because I had all the information. I believe I just called Ms. Roberts' phone, told her to bring her back to the scene.
And about how long was it after you spoke to Ms. Roberts that they returned to the scene?
They couldn't have gotten very far, especially in the road conditions.
And based on those statements that were reported to you from the dispatch from the defendant's father, what, if anything, did you do with regard to Ms. Reed?
I told Officer Mulaney, who was on scene, most of our patrolmen have, it's called Section 12 paperwork inside of all of our cruisers, just for that reason. I advised him to fill out the proper paperwork, and we were going to section Ms. Reed to the hospital for mental evaluation.
And what is the Section 12 from your perspective?
It's a tool for police officers when you come on scene with someone that's having either a mental breakdown, claiming that they want to hurt themselves, anything like that. We have the power as police officers to fill out the proper paperwork. We're not medical professionals. Let a doctor determine if she does need medical help. And if she doesn't want to go, or him, that paperwork allows us to actually physically put her on a stretcher and send her to the hospital. Once she gets to the hospital, it's up to the doctors there to do their due diligence. And if they deem that she's not mentally unstable, then she's released. But at least it's off of us.
Now, the time that Ms. Reed returns to the scene, the fire department, being the ambulance and the engine have already left, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And then at some point, apparatus from the fire department come back in reference to the Section 12?
Correct. So I believe this group was from Station 2, which is the other fire station in the town of Canton. They arrived on scene.
And during that time in between, who arrives first, the fire department or Ms. Roberts with Ms. Reed?
Miss Roberts.
And during that time, after Ms. Roberts arrives with Ms. Reed and prior to the fire department arriving, what, if any, interaction did you have with Ms. Reed during that time?
None.
And then once the fire department returns on scene, what, if anything, do you direct them to with regard to Ms. Reed and with regard to the paperwork you had Officer Mulaney fill out?
Officer Mulaney and Officer Sarif, and looked like in the video, escort Miss Reed to the ambulance, and she's safely transported to the hospital. Our officer back at dispatch called back Mr. Reed, advised her that his daughter was safe.
And then turning back to the scene, following Detective Sergeant Lank's arrival, what, if any, where, if anywhere, did you and Detective Sergeant Lank go on scene following that?
So when we were waiting for the fire truck to arrive, we noticed that the lights went on at 34 Fairview. We needed to obviously speak to the homeowners. I told Sergeant Lank at the time, I believe he was on the phone with CPAC for the state police. I said, the lights just went on the front door. Let's go speak to the homeowners. And we both walked in.
You actually physically walked into the house, is that correct?
Yes.
With respect to prior to you seeing sort of the house lights go on at 34 Fairview, had you seen anybody go into or out of that residence while you were there?
Yes. At some point, either myself or Sergeant Lank told Ms. McCabe that she needs to wake up the homeowners. We need to speak to them.
And why did you say that specifically to Ms. McCabe?
We have no idea why John O'Keefe is laying on the front lawn of a house. We have no idea. The statements from the three people, we need to figure out what happened that night.
And so I guess my question is more why Ms. McCabe versus somebody else?
Ms. McCabe is the sister-in-law of the homeowner, so she would be a friendly face to knock at the door at 6 o'clock in the morning in a blizzard.
Now, beyond anybody at 34 Fairview Road, again, before you observed those lights go on in residence, from the other houses sort of on the street up and down, who, if anyone, did you observe come out of any of those houses?
Nobody.
And was that something that continued throughout the time that you were on scene?
Correct.
So how long were you on scene for in total?
Looking at the log, we were there for almost exactly 2 hours.
And so during those 2 hours, no one from any of the houses on the street came outside?
No, I mean, every emergency truck that showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning during a blizzard, there's no other cars on the road, so you're not coming down with sirens blaring, waking up an entire street, a neighborhood. There's no need for it. So it was just lights and flashing, and to be honest with you, you couldn't see very far.
So you and Detective Sergeant Lake go into the home at 34 Fairview, and who, if anyone, did you speak to in there?
Mr. Albert, Mrs. Albert, Brian, and Nicole.
And who, if anyone else, was present in the home when you spoke with them?
When I was in there, I know Jen was in there, but we didn't speak to her because we already spoke to her, but we just spoke to Brian and Nicole right in the front room.
Now, you heard over the course of the 911 call from Ms. McCabe that she references that 34 Fairview is the Albert residence, correct?
Yes.
And did you know Brian Albert, or were you aware of who he was prior to going to the house that day?
I know of Brian Albert, yes.
And how did you know?
He's a brother of a coworker that I've worked with for 18 years.
And a co-worker that you worked with for 18 years, who's that?
Detective Albert.
What's his first name?
Kevin.
And had you ever been to that house before?
No.
You ever been inside that house before?
No.
And when you go inside that day, it's Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Ms. McCabe, is that correct?
Yes.
And during the time that you were in there, do you recall seeing, or who, if anyone else, you recall seeing in there besides those three people, yourself and Detective Sergeant?
Nobody. Detective Lang took the lead on speaking to Brian and Nicole Albert, and I kind of just moseyed in the front of the house, looked in the dining room, and listened to what they said, what happened. They seemed like they were generally in shock that there was a
Objection.
Sustain. Next question, please.
If anything, did you observe about their demeanor when you spoke?
They looked like they just got woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
And as far as you indicating that you're sort of looking or poking around the front area near the front door, correct?
Yes.
And what, if anything, of note did you observe inside the house when you did?
Nothing. Everything to be in order. It seemed like a normal house.
And following, if you know, about how long was that conversation in the house?
I would say 20, 25 minutes.
And following that conversation, where did you and Detective Sergeant Lang go?
At the time, we both left the residence, came outside, and at that time, Lieutenant Gallagher was arriving. We had like a little bit of a powwow, figured out what was going on, and I believe that's when we saw Jen McCabe's husband show up and walked in.
And again, you didn't know Jennifer McCabe prior to that day, correct?
No.
Did you know her husband prior to that day? So after you saw her husband, who you now know to be your husband, walk in, what, if anything, did you and Detective Sergeant Lang?
Sergeant Lake ran back inside to get a statement from Mr. McCabe as well.
Did you go with him as well?
I did not.
And after you have sort of a conversation between yourself, Detective Sergeant Lang, and Lieutenant Gallagher, what, if anything, did the three of you do from there?
Lieutenant Gallagher immediately said we need to seal off the area of where Officer Keith was located. We grabbed some crime scene tape, put around. He wanted to photograph the area as well.
And who, if anyone, grabbed the crime scene tape?
Myself.
And what, if anything, did you do?
I wrapped it around by the flagpole, tree, and cruiser. It was hard to keep up just because the wind was blowing at such a good rate. And
then what, if anything, did you and the other officers do with respect to the area that was identified to you as where Mr. O'Keefe was upon Officer Sarah's arrival?
Lieutenant Gallagher noticed that the snow was coming down at such a good clip, we couldn't keep it clear, and made the idea of anybody having a leaf blower, and I did. So I told him I'm not too far away from the house, so I shot back to my residence and grabbed my own.
And about how long a period of time was it between the time that you sort of left to go get the leaf blower and the time that you arrived back?
No more than 5 to 7 minutes.
And once you arrived back at back in the area of 34 Fairview Road, what, if anything, happened
I started it up for Lieutenant Gallagher. He took it over, and it worked great.
Now, with respect to that sort of implementation of the leaf blower, what, if anything, did you or other officers do to sort of memorialize it?
So as Lieutenant Gallagher was using the piece of equipment, I used my iPhone, videotaped it, and took two still photos.
Madam Mayor, approach.
Yes.
I actually don't need to. Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit number 33 up on the screen. Just the first one. Ms. Gilman, if you could pause that screen. Okay. Sergeant Good, have you seen what's up on screen as exhibit 33 before?
Yes.
And what do you recognize this?
That's Lieutenant Gallagher.
And what, if anything, does Lieutenant Gallagher have in his hand at the time in this particular?
The leaf blower.
And what's depicted on the screen, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you memorialized on scene that day with respect to the leaf blower?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could just run just this one video. Right there. Now, with respect to using that leaf blower on scene, Sergeant, what, if anything, did you observe in the snow when that was used to blow away sort of the layers?
It exposed the blood and small drinking glass broken.
And do you see those items in what's frozen up on the screen right now?
I do.
If you could, using that laser point, direct the jury's attention to where you observe each of those items in this video.
So that's the glass right there, and then all the blood droplings.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Gilman. You can take it. Now, prior to using the leaf blower, what, if anything, did Lieutenant Gallagher instruct you and any other officers to do with regard to your cruisers that were parked on scene?
We needed to move them out of the way. He wanted to be able to get a good shot of the area, so we kind of closed off the road. And
Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit 41 back up again. Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to fast forward on this to about 40 minutes and 30 seconds in. Good, pause it right there. Now, Sergeant Good, what's up on the screen? Is that the point that you are referencing now as far as about to move your cruiser for that purpose?
this was earlier when we moved out of the way of the ambulance, I believe.
Fine.
But no, could be right.
Regardless, you recognize this to be...
Yes, sorry, if you just play forward, I'll know.
I'm sorry, can you
Just play forward, I guess.
Ms. Gilman, if you could, I'd like to play this through, so about 41 minutes and 12 seconds or so. But if you could just pause it real quick, I'm sorry. Sergeant, at some point when you move this cruiser, what, if anything, you're able to see in this footage of the front lawn area of 34 Fairview?
So my cruiser camera pans the front yard of 34 Fairview, and it shows the snow undisturbed. No footprints, any tracks, anything like that leading anywhere.
And if you could just speak up when we get to that point, and Ms. Gilman, if you could just pause it on that area. Right there. Now, the area that you were speaking about before, is this sort of portion of the video?
Yes.
And using the laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to the portion of the yard that you were talking about in indication of no footprints or anything that you observed in that scene.
Yeah.
Thanks. Ms. Gilman, if you could just let it run through for a couple minutes. Thank you. And Ms. Gilman, you can take it down. Now, Sergeant Good, you had spoke about as well some photographs that were taken to memorialize the area of where Mr. O'Keefe was found. Is that correct?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
show you what's been marked as Exhibit 8. That's if you, first, just if you recognize it.
Yes.
And what do you recognize that?
That is 34 Fairview.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have Exhibit 8 up on the screen. What's up on the screen, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed on scene that day?
Yes.
If I could ask you to flip forward in that book before you to Exhibit number 10.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if we could have Exhibit 10. Sergeant, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you with Exhibit 10?
Yes.
And similarly, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that?
That's a scene where our officers and the witnesses found Officer O'Keefe.
And if you could, using that laser pointer you have before you direct the jury's attention to where you would direct to where Mr. O'Keefe was found.
Objection, hearsay.
No, I'll allow it.
Go ahead, sir. Now, sir, if I could ask you to flip forward in that book just a little bit more to what's been marked as Exhibit 20A.
Okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have that exhibit on the screen as well. And you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 28.
Yes, that's the curbing.
And as far as the curbing is concerned, how is it sort of cleared off in this particular area?
We'd have to kick it off with our shoe to clear it off so we could actually see it, make a mark of it.
And again, that area that you were directed to, as far as where Mr. O'Keefe was found, you observed that in this photograph, Exhibit 28 as well?
Yes.
You could, using the laser pointer before you direct your attention where in this photograph that is. Okay. Now, may I approach just to...
Yes.
So lastly, I'm just going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 27. Sergeant, do you recognize that?
I do.
Ms. Gilman, if we could have 27 on the screen. And Sergeant Good, what's up on the screen and before you as Exhibit 27? Sorry, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as Exhibit 27?
Yes.
And if you could describe to the jury what we're looking at in this.
So we have the blood, and then right here is the broken drinking glass that was located.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
May I approach just to retreat?
Yes.
Let me have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Following your time on scene that morning, sir, where did you go from there?
Once we cleared 34 Fairview, I returned to the Canton Police Department.
And the items that you were talking about as far as the blood, which believed to be blood droplets in snow and the piece of a cocktail glass, what, if anything, did you or other officers do with regard to that?
Overruled.
Go ahead, sir.
Detective Sergeant Lank transported those back to the police department.
Again, just one moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Stianetti?
Thank you, Your Honor.